It seems that in a small river town there was a young man named Elmer who was so talented at fishing that he finally aroused the suspicions of the Fish and Game people because he came in with such a great catch every trip out. And the game warden asked the local sheriff, who was a very close friend of this young man, Elmer, if he would find out what was going on. So the sheriff one day just casually suggested to Elmer that he join him on the fishing trip. And they rode out into the middle of the river together, and once out there, Elmer took out a stick of dynamite, lighted the fuse, tossed it in the water, and after the explosion, the surface of the water was covered with fish, which he began to pick up. And the sheriff looked at him and said, "Elmer, do you realize that you have just committed a felony?" And Elmer reached in the tackle box, pulled out another stick of dynamite, lighted the fuse, handed it to the sheriff, and said, "Did you come here to talk or fish?" The story of the fella here a while ago was running for Congress as a Republican. He stopped by a farm to do some campaigning, and when the farmer heard he was a Republican, his jaw dropped, and he said, "Wait right here." He said, "While I get Ma. She's never seen a Republican before." So he got Ma, and the candidate looked around for a podium to give his speech from. The only thing he could find was a pile of that stuff that Bess Truman took 35 years trying to get Harry to call fertilizer. So he got up on the mound, and when they came back, he gave his speech. End of it, the farmer says, "That's the first time I've ever heard a Republican speech." The candidate said, "That's the first time I've ever given a Republican speech from a Democratic platform." It is a story about an elderly couple who were getting ready for bed one night, and she said, "Oh, I just am so hungry for ice cream, and there isn't any in the house." And he said, "I'll get some." "Oh," she said, "you're a dear." And she said, "Vanilla with chocolate sauce." He says, "Vanilla with chocolate sauce." She said, "Write it down. Now, you'll forget, dear." He said, "I won't forget." She said, "Some whipped cream on top." And he said, "Vanilla with chocolate sauce, whipped cream on top." And she said, "And a cherry." And he said, "And a cherry on top." "Oh," she said, "Please write it down. I know you'll forget." He said, "I won't forget. Vanilla with chocolate sauce, whipped cream, and a cherry on top." And away he went. By the time he got back, she was already in bed. He handed her the paper bag. She opened it, and there was a ham sandwich. And she said, "I told you to write it down. You forgot the mustard." There's a story, you knew I'd have one of these, about a fella who always wanted to work with animals. And he applied to the zoo. And they had an ad out, they needed someone there. And then he found out to his dismay that the job they had immediately open was dressing in a gorilla outfit, taking the place of the gorilla who just died until a new one could be delivered. And then they promised that he'd have a regular job at the zoo once that took place. Well, he put on the suit and he got in the cage. And he got a little bored sitting around, so particularly when the children were there, he began doing tricks and showing off for them. And finally he got so interested in that, he got carried away one day. He was swinging on a rope, and he swung so far that he landed in the lion's cage that was next door. And the lion came roaring at him. And he started screaming for help. "Somebody get me out of here, get me out of here." And the lion jumped on him and says, "Shut up or you'll get us both fired." You know, there's a 10-year delay in the Soviet Union of delivery of an automobile. And only 1 out of 7 families in the Soviet Union to a fella, and this is their story that they tell, this joke, that this man, he laid down his money, and then the fella that was in charge said to him, "Okay, come back in 10 years and get your car." And he said, "Morning or afternoon?" And the fellow behind the counter said, "Well, 10 years from now, what difference does it make?" And he said, "Well, the plumber's coming in the morning." I didn't tell this one to Gorbachev. A fellow that was on his way to a mountain resort, and a policeman stopped him and said, "Did you know that you're driving without taillights?" And the driver hopped out of the car. He was so badly shaken that the officer took pity on him and said, "Well, now, wait a minute, calm down. It's not that serious an infraction." The fellow said, "It may not mean much to you, but to me it means I've lost my trailer, a wife, and 4 kids." Out driving on a back road on his way to look at some property, and suddenly noticed down beside him was a chicken keeping pace with him, and he was doing 60 miles an hour. And suddenly the chicken spurted out ahead of him. And it looked to him as if the chicken had 3 legs. And then it turned and went down a sign road and into a barnyard, and the driver turned down that lane, drove into the barnyard. There was a farmer there, and he asked him, he said, "Did you see a chicken go by here?" And the farmer said, "Yep." He says, "Did they have 3 legs?" And the farmer says, "Yep. I raise them that way. I breed them." He says, "You do?" He said, how come?" "Well," he said, "I just love the drumstick, and Ma always liked the drumstick, and now Junior's come along, and he likes it, and we just got tired of fighting over it, so I've been breeding 3-legged chickens." The driver said, "Well, how do they taste?" He says, "I don't know. I haven't been able to catch one yet."